Which Pixar film has the most death? If you added up all of the deaths we see across the 29 Pixar animated movies, which film would come out as the deadliest? Would it be the one about the guy who travels through the afterlife? Or maybe the one about killing superheroes? Or maybe the deadliest Pixar film is the one you didn't expect. Hello Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, the show that asks, what if YouTubers had feelings? And sure make me happy if you clicked that subscribe button. Ah, shucks! Thanks, guys! Yeah, okay, I know. Today we're talking about Pixar, but not the happy-go-lucky nature of the movies. No, instead, I want to see just how deadly they are. See, several years ago, in the before times, we here at Film Theory counted up all of the deaths in the Disney animated canon, which we actually updated last year to correct a few mistakes and tally up the new movies. But, long story short, there were a lot of deaths in Disney's animated canon, and I thought it would be fun to bring the exact same nerdy overthinking and frame-by-frame analysis to the wonderful worlds of Pixar. Did I just want an excuse to rewatch all of Pixar's stuff? Maybe! But today I wanted to go through all 29 movies in the Pixar canon to figure out just how many kills this lovable lamp has to its name, and which Pixar film is the deadliest. But okay, before we start counting up these sweet, juicy kills, a sentence I'm now regretting saying because it's out there and will be clipped on the internet forever, we need to establish our rules. Similar to how we approached the Disney death count series, not all kills are created equally, so more or less we're going to be using the exact same rule set we established in that series. Rule number 1, only deaths from creatures who are able to speak or otherwise think or feel will be included. While an ant getting squished is no doubt tragic, for the ant, unless that ant is from A Bug's Life or something similar, it's not going to be showing up on our kill count. The bugs from A Bug's Life are way different from the ones from, say, The Incredibles or whatever, because they are actual characters with motivation and sentience. Rule number 2, we're only counting deaths that actually happen during the runtime of the movie, so while Darla from Finding Nemo is essentially the Grim Reaper of the aquatic world, since none of her fish fatalities occurred during the film, they won't count for our list today. That's only one example, but you get it. Rule number 3, we're only counting deaths that occur as a result of characters or events that happen in the movie. Like, the opening scene of Up takes place over several decades, and while presumably millions or even billions of people died in the world during that time span, well, for us, the only death that matters for our purposes is Ellie. I still cry every time. Rule number 4, if a character dies but is then brought back to life with some Pixar pixie dust, that doesn't count. And finally, rule number 5, we're only taking movies made by Pixar into account here, not spin-offs or sequels made by other studios, or the Disney Plus shows Pixar was forced to make. So sorry Planes or the Toy Story holiday specials, you guys don't count. Other than that, if a death happens in any one of the 29 Pixar films, it's good enough to make it into our Pixar graveyard. With these rules, not only will we be able to tally up the kill count for each individual film, but we'll keep a running tally to see if Pixar can come anywhere close to the mountain of bodies that Daddy Disney ended up building higher than Cinderella's castle. So get your tissues ready and prepare to cry, loyal theorists, as we jump into this like a desk lamp onto a letter. So right off the bat, let's start with the movies that don't actually have any death in them. Yeah, unlike Disney, where almost all of their movies have at least one death, Pixar's filmography is a lot more tame. A whopping 11 of the 29 Pixar films are completely killless, even though it does feel like some of them should have some kills. For example, there are 0 deaths that I could count anywhere in Soul. Yeah, the movie that literally has our main character die within the first 10 minutes of the film technically has no deaths in it. Yeah, I know that's a weird sentence, but, well, if we're getting technical, which I mean, this is film theory, of course we're getting technical, Joe doesn't actually die at the start of the film. After falling down a manhole cover, he slips into a coma and his body is clinging to life in the hospital while his soul traverses the great before. Thankfully for Joe, his soul returns to his body at the end of the film, so even if he did die, it gets reversed, so it doesn't count based on rule number 4. For all the other souls we see in the film, they're already dead by the time they show up in the plot, so their deaths technically don't occur during the movie and thus are excluded via rule 2. And don't think I didn't remember the cat. In the movie, Joe's soul ends up possessing a therapy cat, temporarily booting the cat's soul out of its body. But all of the souls are inevitably returned to their rightful bodies by the credits, and so the movie All About Death actually ends up having a big ol' goose egg on the death counter. At this point, with the lack of kills in these Pixar movies, they must have some crazy protection here. Like, are they getting protected by the partner for today's theory, NordVPN? Cheesy transition aside, come on. At this point, you know what a VPN does. You know that they help protect your internet connection and keep your browsing private in this crazy world where everyone's trying to log your browsing data. But something else awesome it can do? Well, you can get access to libraries of streaming services all over the globe. Fun fact, because Theorist is such a worldwide organization, we have team members from Australia, Europe, Southeast Asia, you name it. And I recently recommended RetiredRinne to one of them out in Germany, but they didn't have the English dub like anywhere in his country. He really wanted to watch it in English, and thankfully we had a solution that didn't involve him attaching a bunch of balloons to his house and floating to another hemisphere. See, RetiredRinne is in English on Crunchyroll here in the States, and here's where Nord came in handy. They have servers all over the world, and since they route your data through those servers, they basically trick your internet connection into thinking it's coming from a different country. So he popped on NordVPN, chose one of their American servers, and bam! Now he has access to the incredible English dub of one of the best animes in years, all without having to sign up for some random service just to get the dub he wanted. Easy as that. So if you want to get the ease and convenience of worldwide streaming from the comfort of your own home, go to nordvpn.com/filmtheory to get a huge discount on a 2-year plan plus 4 months for free. You can also just click the link in the description or scan the QR code that's on screen. There's no downside since you also get Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/FILMTHEORY. Thanks again to Nord for sponsoring this theory, but let's get back into the Pixar kill count. Another surprise for me? Ratatouille. In the movie, both of Linguini's parents, including Chef Gusteau, are dead, but since their deaths happened before the movie begins, well, they don't count. This is also why I'm not including the hanging rat corpses shown to Remy as well. They were that way before the movie started, and we don't see any of the other rats die. In Toy Story 2, despite the toys' best efforts to add vehicular manslaughter to their rap sheets, surprisingly, everyone also makes it out of that movie unscathed. In Toy Story 4, there is one toy that ends up getting ripped in half thanks to a cat, but a few minutes later we see the other half of it kicking it in the club. Well, not kicking it, but he is still alive, at least the last time we see him. The rest of the films that occupy the no-kill list are Monsters, Inc. and Monsters University, Luca, Turning Red, Inside Out 2, Cars, and Cars 3. Yes, you'll definitely have noticed a few gaps in there, but don't worry, we will get to those. But so far, our Pixar graveyard is looking mighty empty. Come on, Pixar, it's free real estate in there. So enough talk about deaths that don't count, let's get into some real kills now. And what better place to start than with the first kill we ever see in a Pixar film from their very first movie, the original Toy Story.
Sliding it! Hit the dirt!
Yeah, while this scene looks G-rated at first glance, let's stop to actually think about the implications of what we're seeing here. Remember, this is Toy Story, and in this series, every single toy on planet Earth, even ones made from craft supplies, are living, sentient creatures. And sure, while some playthings like balls or musical instruments appear to be inanimate, real, proper toys are always considered to be alive and self-aware. That, no doubt, includes our little G.I. Joe knockoff here. Well, that is until he gets popped by an M80. Rest easy, soldier. You may be the first Pixar death, but you certainly won't be the last. And hey, while we're on the subject, we might as well round out the Toy Story series here. Well, at least until Toy Story 5 comes out a little later this year. Like, seriously, another one? I can't wait to see how these toys make me cry again. Anyway, there's one more big death in this franchise that I want to discuss because you might have missed this one on your first watch through. See, near the beginning of Toy Story 3, this toy train gets absolutely decimated by a sugar-crazed toddler. Now, we're gonna count this train as a character since it's shown alongside other toys that we know are sentient like Jessie, Slinky, and Mr. Potato Head. So Pixar is clearly trying to put this train on the same level as those main characters. Now, don't get me wrong, of course, some toys in this world can be beat up pretty bad, but not necessarily die because of it. But we're still going to count this one because later on in the film, we see the custodial staff throwing it away. And as we're told in the movie,
there's only one-way toys leave this place. Poor fella. Trash truck comes at dawn.
The implication here is that the only way toys leave the preschool is in a body bag, so I think it's fair to assume that our little Thomas the Tank Engine friend is a goner. Poor fella. Add him to the counter! Man, we are nearly halfway through the Pixar catalog, and our kill count is at 2. You know, I'm more shocked than anything. I thought this would be way higher. Anyway, let's move on to Brave to see if we can change your fate. I'm hopeful that this one will get us a lot of kills because of its more fantasy sword and sorcery nature. So the main antagonist of Brave is Mor'du, once a legendary prince, now cursed to be a ravenous bear after consuming an evil potion. And at the end of Brave, Mor'du is defeated and his soul is released, letting us count this as a kill. So Brave etches its name onto the death counter with, wait, just 1 kill? That's it? Seriously? Okay, so what's next here? What about the good dinosaur? Remember this one? No? I mean, fair, this was probably one of Pixar's first real misses, but this movie is still deadly. And I have high hopes for this because Disney's Dinosaur ended up being like the most deadly movie there for ages. Anyway, so early on in the film, we see our main character Arlo's dad get swept away in a flash flood, and no amount of talking to him as a spirit is going to bring him back. So yeah, that's 1 kill right there. In fact, we might very well have our first multi-kill movie on the board here. In the movie's climax, Arlo is forced to go toe-to-wing with a bunch of pterodactyls in order to save his friend Spot. And working together, they're actually able to dispatch these guys one by one by knocking them into the river. And I mean, come on, they have to drown here, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more deaths, is what I would be saying if the creator didn't confirm that they survived on Twitter. Disappointing! So yeah, that's 1 total kill for the good dinosaur. Alrighty then, well then what about finding Dory? Maybe there's multiple kills here. Listen guys, I'm starting to get desperate. Well, near the start of the movie, Dory, Marlin, and Nemo are being chased by a giant squid and are about to become casualties of their own right before a shipping container falls and crushes the squid. Now, to be fair, it's not totally clear that the squid dies, and these sorts of squids and octopods are known for their ability to compress their bodies. But we do see his little tentacles like curl up all Wicked Witch of the East style, certainly implying a death here, even if it is cartoonish. And let's be real, these shipping containers are heavy, even when they're empty. For real, they can weigh anywhere between 4,000 and 5,000 pounds, or 1,800 to 2,200 kilos. Even a giant squid isn't likely coming back after getting squished by that. So 1 death for Finding Dory. Not too far underwater with that one, huh? And speaking of water, let's move on to the breakout hit, Elemental. Now, of course, the movie ends with a flood that completely ravages through Firetown, which might have caused a few deaths. But we don't actually see any of those potential casualties, so we can't really account for them, which sucks. I thought we would have our first multi-kill movie here. Either way, there's also a part where one of our leads, Wade, evaporates and dies, but then comes back to life just a few minutes later, so that doesn't count either. In fact, the only confirmed death in Elemental comes in a flashback where we see Ember's grandmother go out, so just the 1 for Elemental. Next up, we got Incredibles 2. Yeah, a bit conspicuous that we're not talking about Incredibles 1 yet, but just hold your horses, I promise, we'll get there. Anyway, this series is one all about superheroes and hasn't shied away from the reality of what bad guys would actually do. So how does the sequel fare in our kill count? Is it deadly? Well, early on in Incredibles 2, we see the death of Mr. Deaver, father of Winston and Evelyn. So yeah, that's 1 death right there. And later on, their mother also died from a, quote, broken heart, but we don't see that happen, so we can't count it because of rule number 2. So yeah, just 1 kill for the Incredibles 2. I kind of thought that one would be higher given the first movie, spoilers there, but we can't dwell on it because we have to move onward to Onward. Yeah, so I know some of you are probably sitting there wondering, huh? I don't remember this one, which is an absolute shame because this is a really sweet film that was absolutely decapitated because it came out just a week before the plague lockdown in March of 2020. Anyway, Onward took the idea of swords and sorcery and Dungeons and Dragons and put it in a modern setting, and I mean, the whole plot is about the main characters reviving their dead dad for a day to hang out with them. So surely there are some deaths in here. Well, Well, maybe not. The dad does die again in this movie after his time back in the land of the living, which we're gonna count because, you know, why not? But other than that, well, there is a dragon that gets slain at the end of the movie, but it's a magic dragon made up from a pile of rubble animated by a curse. So it doesn't really meet our requirements of being sentient, so yeah, only 1 for Onward. Like, really? Dang. Believe it or not, but we're nearly 2/3 through these Pixar flicks and we have a grand total of 8 deaths so far, with an 8-way tie for first place. If Pixar hopes to catch up with the depravity that is Disney, we're gonna have to start carving up some real headstones and fast. But don't you worry, things are going to get deadlier from here on out. Trust me, I was getting worried too. And the best way to drive up that kill count, at least just a little bit, well, it's up. Obviously, we all know about Ellie's death in the first 10 minutes, and what can only be described as the saddest scene in cinematic history, but there's a lot more death in this movie than you might remember. Why? Well, originally, I thought I found something pretty clever. During one scene, the villain Muntz is monologuing to Carl and Russell, and we see a collection of 9 headgears of previous explorers he dealt with as trophies on display. That would be 9 deaths, right? Well, while the deaths are implied, they happened off-screen and not during the events of the movie, so sadly, we can't count them. But since Muntz himself meets his well-deserved demise at the end of the film, that means we have finally broken the tie and have our first multi-kill movie. Break out the party streamers, gang. We did it! And you know what else gets this honor? Pixar's latest release, Elio. If you haven't seen this movie, because yikes, nobody did, Elio is the story of a young boy who dreams of being abducted by aliens. Hashtag relatable. Spoiler, but Elio does get abducted by aliens, and he gets to see all of the advanced creatures and their technology, and among that technology is the ability to create clones of sentient beings. This one was tricky, and honestly, I could see it going either way. It's definitely implied that the clones were designed to die after they were no longer needed, and they didn't seem too upset about it when both clones do eventually bite the dust. But they are also able to speak, feel, and make decisions, so based on our criteria that we've established, they should count towards the deaths here. Heck, if we counted the clone army from Ralph Breaks the Internet, I mean, come on, these guys absolutely need to count too, so that's 2 right there. Additionally, they mentioned something called the Blood War going on elsewhere in the galaxy, and one of the alien species is described as, quote, killing machines. But we don't actually see any of this to get the full context, so I don't think it's right to count that. Oh, and also the reason Elio is so obsessed with aliens is because his parents were killed and he feels alone, but that happens before the movie starts, so that's not gonna count either. Same thing with the skeleton Elio finds in the brig of the alien ship. He was dead long before the movie started. So that's just 2 for Elio, tying it for first place and putting our overall Pixar kill count at just 12. Kind of underwhelming for a film about a whole galaxy and something called a blood war, but maybe we'll find more luck with Bug's Life. Well, maybe not, because when I actually sat down to rewatch this, these bugs are hella tough. Case in point, a flea survives being absolutely torched by a pile of matches, and literally just a minute later, we see a fly go full speed into a bug zapper, and he seems like he survives.
No! Hurry, no! Don't look at the light! I can't help it. It's so beautiful.
Does that sound like someone who's dying? My man is having the time of his life. And on top of that, real-life insects have a notoriously high resistance to fall damage, so I don't think we can count this one. But all that said, there are deaths still here to count in this film. Early on, Hopper kills 3 of his grasshopper goons by crushing them under a mountain of food to make a point about the power of the masses. You know, eat the rich and all that stuff. And then, of course, Hopper gets his comeuppance when Flick tricks him into becoming Bird Chow. Not only does this move A Bug's Life to the top of our Pixar kill count leaderboard, but it also brings our total so far to 16. Okay, you know what we really need at this point? Something to just jumpstart our kill count into the next level, you know? Into like the next life. And surely Coco, a movie about the Day of the Dead celebration, must be filled with deaths galore. I mean, this film has the opportunity for people to die twice, potentially getting us some real numbers. Well, maybe, but it's also less than you might expect. We see Ernesto get crushed by a bell in the opening few minutes, and later we flash back to Hector dying from poison. And then there's Chicharron, who, despite already being dead, disappears from the land of the dead because
he's been forgotten. When there's no one left in the living world who remembers you, you disappear from this world. We call it the final death.
Man, that's like super death. And since the characters refer to this as the final death themselves, we're going to count it. And finally, we see in the epilogue that Grandmama Coco has died from old age. So yeah, despite having a bunch of dead characters, this movie all about Dia de los Muertos has an overall kill count of only 4, tying it with A Bug's Life and bringing our overall count to 20. Okay, we are starting to run short on films here, and we barely have enough deaths to make an interesting true crime podcast. What else can we look at here to just kick this into overdrive? Well, okay, how about we talk about a movie that has nearly as many deaths as the first 23 films we've talked about combined. And would you guess that that movie is Cars 2? Yeah, really. See, if you've never watched Cars 2, this film is actually more of a spy thriller than anything else, and for some reason it seemed intent to cover the death quota for the entire franchise. Let's get counting. In the film's opening, Agent Leland Turbo ends up getting compacted into a cube by the baddies, junkyard style, after his cover is blown. Similarly, Agent Rod Redline ends up being brutally tortured for information before being blasted by a ray gun, which bursts him into flames. So yeah, we're totally dead. But the majority of deaths are actually caused by Finn McMissile, the British hero spy with a ton of deadly gadgets designed specifically for dispatching bad guys. He releases an oil slick that causes one evil henchman to crash into the sea, kills another 12 when he sets off explosives on a spiral tower, and then just brutally crushes 2 more cars in Japan using an elevator. Finally, at the end of the movie, he ends up sinking a sapient ship with yet again more explosives. And so that brings our total kill count for Cars 2 to 18, which obviously moves Cars 2 into the lead and doubles our total death count to 38. Okay, how about a movie that got killed at the box office next? Yeah, we're talking Lightyear, and you know what? This one is actually going to add another set of double digits to our kill count. Now, in terms of human deaths, there's only just one, Alicia Hawthorne, who dies of old age while waiting for Buzz to return home from his mission. However, she isn't the only thing that died in this film, but figuring out what to count was a little bit tough. For example, surely more people died of old age than we see in the film, but we can't count that in good conscience, because I mean, we don't see them. Additionally, while Buzz and his buddies do exterminate some of the local wildlife on this alien planet, these bugs and plants don't seem to reach our threshold of sentience, so they don't count either. In fact, most of the deaths that end up counting for Lightyear actually come from robots. First up, there's Sox, who sadly gets crushed by Zurg, and not one but 2 different Ivan AI autopilots that get destroyed when both Zurg and Buzz's ships get blown up. And then there's Zurg's robot henchmen. Now, this might seem controversial to count them, but we're going to for a couple of reasons. Firstly, they have the ability to communicate and express independent social behavior. I mean, just look at that side eye. That's absolutely sentient behavior. Plus, if we're counting Sox and the Ivans, I think we should count these guys too. Just because they're evil robots doesn't mean they're not people, you know? Anyway, these robots are conveniently numbered 1 through 24 and are gradually destroyed throughout the film, with the remaining few going down at the end with Zurg's ship. So that brings Lightyear's tally up to 28 and our total count to 66 total Pixar deaths. And speaking of robots, I think it's time we jumped into the Pixar robot movie. So yeah, in WALL-E, we don't actually see any humans die, but just like we counted Sox, the robots here in this universe are clearly sentient beings with character and personality. I mean, they talk either in English or like R2-D2 style beeps and boops, so they count for us, you know? So how many did we get? Well, our main villain Otto is switched off at the end of the movie, presumably never to be turned on again. So I mean, yeah, that's like him more or less dying, right? Similarly, Go4, Otto's right-hand bot, is thrown out a window and smashes onto the ground. And if he's anything like a cell phone, that guy ain't turning on again. And then there are the steward bots, aka security. At first, these guys seem like mindless automatons, but we do see these bots have the ability to communicate. So sure, they're gonna count for our purposes today. When the Great Robot Revolution gets going, 36 were dispatched to deal with it. However, when they run into WALL-E and get killed, only 35 of them are seen. I guess one of them must have run away like a coward. Probably the best move, given everything that happened. But we're not done yet. Lifeguard bot, who ironically isn't waterproof, dies when splashed with just a little bit of water. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, spoilers, WALL-E himself dies at the end of the movie. But Eve manages to bring him back online, so so he doesn't count for us today. That catapults Wall-E into the lead of our competition with 38 deaths and brings our running Pixar total to the triple-digit mark at 104. Just incredible stuff. And speaking of incredible, well, let's buckle up and tackle my favorite Pixar film, The Incredibles. Fun fact, I've probably seen this movie like 40 plus times, and all of the DVD extras too. Anyway, just to meet this head on, when you think of death and The Incredibles, this is probably the first scene that comes to mind. Here, Mr. Incredible learns that at least 15 of his super colleagues were eliminated by the Omni Droid, which is a great start for us, right? Well, it would be, but we can't count these based on our rules. All of these deaths happen off-screen before most of the movie takes place, so sadly, they don't count. But don't worry, because there are way more we can count. For example, there are the 5 supers that Edna tells us died in various cape-related accidents, which we do see on screen in flashbacks, so they do count. Edna's right, y'all.
No capes!
And of course, Syndrome didn't heed this advice himself and is also done in by his own cape, leaving us with 6 confirmed deaths. But it's not just supers and villains who bite it in The Incredibles. No, there are a ton of totally normal human deaths in here too. In fact, The Incredibles themselves end up dispatching a ton of goons throughout the movie. Most of them just look like they get knocked out or are not outright killed, but not all of them. For example, while breaking into Syndrome's lair, Bob throws a giant robot at 2 guards out front. Realistically, this would probably kill both guards, but one of them shows like a little sign of life as Bob runs by, so we're only going to count this as 1 death for Mr. Incredible. He also hucks a rock at a guard on patrol, causing him to fall off of a multi-story window onto his back. So yeah, he's also super dead. Like father, like son, we see Dash go on a killing spree during the film's second act action set piece, dashing away from some henchmen and causing a total of 6 people to meet their maker. When Dash and Violet meet up, Violet's force field causes 2 more ships to crash, leading to 2 more deaths. And once the whole family is reunited, they go toe-to-toe with a few more goons, but only one of them we can say definitively dies in an explosion. So right there, that's 11 more kills to add to this film's death count, and we are still going, guys. Yeah, at the climax of the film, we see the Omni Droid attacking a city full of civilians. And before the Incredibles arrive to help save the day, the army does their best to keep the Omni Droid under control, but they aren't doing a great job at it, leading to the deaths of a few soldiers. For example, we see 6 tanks face off against the Omni Droid, likely leading to many of their deaths. Yeah, in director Brad Bird's previous masterpiece, The Iron Giant, they make a point to show soldiers getting out of a tank at the last minute to save their lives, but they specifically don't with The Incredibles. And while we only see 1 tank definitively blow up, considering the fact that by the time The Incredibles arrive at the city, the Omni Droid has moved on to a new neighborhood, that heavily implies that it dealt with the rest of these tanks with ease. So, okay, how many soldiers can we say died in these 6 tanks? Based on the look, these tanks appear to be some variation of the M41 Walker Bulldog tanks, which were designed to have 4 operators. 6 tanks times 4 operators per tank, and that's 24 more kills to add to the list. And on top of that, remember this iconic moment where Frozone asked,
Where is my super suit?
Well, that crash in the background is more than just comedic timing. That, my friends, is an attack helicopter falling out the sky. So yeah, we need to add at least 2 more kills for the pilot and gunner here too. And last but not least, well, we have to count the Omni Droid as well. Yeah, that's right. While the Omni Droid looks like a cold, lifeless robot, we're told that it's made up of a true artificial intelligence. In the end, it chooses, on its own, to betray Syndrome and save its own skin. Or shell, I suppose. That's a character with agency if ever I've seen one, so when it's defeated at the end of the movie, that's the 44th and final kill for The Incredibles, bringing our total Pixar kill count to 148. Oh, and just to clear things up real quick, I know Bob destroyed an Omni Droid earlier in the film, but it looks like its power cord just got ripped out. I'm assuming the same artificial intelligence is still powering the final one as this initial one, since the whole point was to learn, right? So yeah, it's only gonna count as 1 kill despite ripping itself inside out. And speaking of, our second to last film is Inside Out. So this one's a bit weird because most of the characters in this movie are, well, you know, thoughts, emotions, memories, that sort of thing. But to keep to the spirit of this episode, we're going to consider characters like Joy, Sadness, and Bing Bong as living, and if they somehow disappear, that counts as a kill. Cool? Cool. Speaking of, well, we all remember the tearjerker that is Bing Bong's death, so that's 1 right off the bat here for Inside Out. But, well, maybe we shouldn't be too upset because Bing Bong himself got a kill on his his own before he died, blowing this cloud person out of existence. Not to be outdone, Joy also does a similar thing to another cloud person later in the film. Just brutal. But the real numbers start adding up when we count Riley's imaginary boyfriends.
The word imaginary is offensive because it denies his existence. We talked about this.
Oh, sorry, Riley's Canadian boyfriends. Near the end of the film, when Joy is trying to get back into HQ, she creates a tower of boyfriends, and by my count, this tower is roughly 42 boyfriends high. And while they do help Joy achieve her goal, as a result, they seem to all end up tumbling into the memory dump just like Bing Bong. So, yeah, add them to the count, and before you feel too bad, just remember.
I would die for Ryan. I would die for Ryan.
So, hey, they got their wish. Anyway, this means that Inside Out just squeaks by The Incredibles as the deadliest Pixar movie so far. But none of these movies, and I mean none of them, hold a candle to our final Pixar film. The deadliest Pixar movie with the highest kill count is, drumroll please, Finding Nemo. Yes, really. Not only do a whopping 2/3 of all Pixar deaths happen just in this one movie, but they all happen in just one scene. And what is that scene? Well, it's the cold open that sets up the entire course of the movie, where Marlin loses most of his kids and his wife, Coral. At the beginning of Finding Nemo, we learn that Marlin and Coral laid
It's over 400 eggs.
Now already, that's a lot, and it could mean a ton of different numbers. Over 400 could mean 1,000,000, but that's a little bit ridiculous, so instead, we're gonna take this literally and count 401 eggs here. Now, at first, it might seem weird that I'm counting eggs because, well, they're eggs after all, but the world of Finding Nemo operates just a little bit differently, it seems. For example, when Marlin starts talking loudly, Coral warns,
You're gonna wake the kids.
she calls them kids, implying that even though they're just eggs, they sleep and are aware of their surroundings. This actually lines up with the real-world research, which has shown that fish eggs are able to chemically communicate when they're ready to hatch. So while they're helpless in this situation, those eggs should count for our grand total death count. So when that barracuda comes along and eats them all and Coral, we're counting that as an astonishing 401 deaths. Not 402 because obviously Nemo survives, so Coral is taking his place there. This absolutely dwarfs the rest of the Pixar library. Finding Nemo, more like finding guilty of quadricentennial homicide, am I right? Can I get a high five? Hello? So after going through every single Pixar film frame by frame, Finding Nemo is the undisputed deadliest film in the canon with 401 deaths. And if we add up the entire studio's output, we get a grand total of, drumroll please, 594 deaths. You know, honestly, less than I was expecting, especially since the Disney death count got into the hundreds of thousands. But, well, what did I expect from movies rated G and PG? Or, you know what, maybe the mouse just wanted to hog all the murder for themselves. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut! Up next on Film Theory, Disney is deadlier than you think.